Good evening and welcome to the Kaufman Corner podcast, episode number 3. Back with you as always, the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, of course, one of the co-founders of Baseball Prospectus, writer for The Ringer, The Athletic, of course, his Rany on the Royals blog, I was going to call it podcast, blog, one of the iconic pieces of writing when it comes to the Kansas City Royals. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB, and Rany, let's go streaking is how I put it on the preview tweet. This team continues to be streaky. I don't know if it's not a good thing right now. 4 straight losses. And the one thing that's been the theme is that I think really they're lucky to be here. Is that possible? At 5-9 with their inability to consistently score runs and at times some bad pitching sprinkled around some great bullpen work. Is that the theme here, that we're getting enough games in that we're starting to really worry that there might be something fundamentally wrong here?
Yes. I think that's the short answer. I'm concerned. It's only been 2 weeks. It's only been 14 games. It would be easy to say that we just haven't seen enough to be worried. 5-9 isn't really the problem. I mean, the difference between 5-9 and 7-7 is 2 games. And if they were 5-9, but otherwise playing well, I wouldn't be concerned. But what concerns me is the 5-9 record is actually the best part about this team right now.
Right.
Everything else about this team is actually worse. I mean, just look at their run differential. They're minus 24. They've scored 43 and allowed 67. They have the worst run differential in the American League. What we call the Pythagorean formula that estimates what your win-loss record should be based on your runs and runs allowed. The Royals should be 4-10. So when you're 5-9 and overachieving, that's not a good look. But I think it's beyond that. I think it's just the fact that the Royals are having the same issues that they've had for years, and they seem no closer to even acknowledging what those issues are than before the season, let alone trying to address them. Right? You mentioned the bullpen. The bullpen is quietly or not so quietly been the greatest strength of this team, maybe the only strength of this team. They've actually had some really impressive performances out of that bullpen. And if they were an otherwise mediocre team, you could see a scenario in which a phenomenal bullpen, maybe not at the level of 8 years ago, but a very, very good bullpen drags this team to above 500 and puts them in that playoff fringe. And then, as we know in the playoffs, if you have a strong bullpen and you can let those guys loose for 6 innings at a time, anything can happen. But the fact that the Royals are 5-9 despite a great bullpen tells you just how bad they have been in every other area of the game. Offense and starting pitching. There are some major issues here, and I think we need to start acknowledging them.
And what is the fundamental issue? Like let's start with Whitt Merrifield. Like that's we're obviously getting to territory where I think as a fan you're okay to be absolutely terrified that this is not going to come around.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, the issue is that Whitt Merrifield is one of only like 4 guys in the Royals everyday lineup right now that has an OPS of under like 500, right? Like he's not even the worst hitter on the team right now. Adalberto Mondesi has a lower OPS. Carlos Santana is barely ahead of him. And Bobby Witt Jr. also, right? So that's 4 guys who are just, we're not saying they're hitting badly. We're not saying they're slumping. We're talking about guys, their OPS plus is in single digits, if not a negative number. So in general, the issue is that there are a lot of guys not hitting, but specifically to Merrifield, I think we have to start wondering, is this the cliff? All right, we talked about this. We touched on it a little bit last week, and it's been another week, and he's not doing any better. I mean, after he went 1 for 6 today, and he raised his batting average. All right, he's 8 for 59 on the season, with 2 doubles and 2 walks, and even if he plays well the rest of the season, like he is in such a hole now, it's going to be very hard for him to get his numbers back up to an average major league season, let alone average for Whitt Merrifield. He's 33 years old. And once again, we talked about this before, but the Royals had every opportunity to trade this guy when his value is high for talent that would help them now. And pretty much every other team in baseball, whether a team that subscribed to the hardcore tanking philosophy like the Astros and the Cubs, or even teams that are much less transactional, but still realistic. Teams that found themselves losing 100 games in a season with a guy in the peak of his career who was, a player highly coveted by pretty much every team because he could play second, he could play right field. Like you could slot him in anywhere. So it's not like they didn't have a lot of suitors. We know they had a lot of suitors. We heard rumor after rumor of not just teams, but actual player packages being offered for him. And the Royals refused to even consider. I don't think they ever seriously considered trading him, which is fine if your plan works. As you like to say, they're in the get it right business. Well, here we are, finally in a season where the Royals at least had realistic hopes of contending. I'd still say they're not ready. They're still a year or two away from truly being ready, but at least they could think about it. And Whitt Merrifield is 33 years old, which is an age at which good but not great players tend to decline quickly. And he is showing every sign of decline, not just decline, but to the point where he may actively be hurting this team.
So I want to do that because I'm with you, and I was on team trade Whitt, not because, I think the problem for so many fans is they want to trade the players they don't like, right? And they can't imagine trading the ones they do like. And I do think there's a section of the fan base that's evolved beyond that recognizes small market teams in baseball just cannot hold on to all their guys. That's a fool's errand to even try it. And so I don't mean to say like, you and I and a handful of other math nerds or whatever are the only ones out on an island in this Arctic winter of hate. If you mention trading a guy, there were plenty of people that got it and understood and have seen the A's and Rays reload by moving pieces. But there is a faction of the fan base that can't imagine trading, a guy who's productive and just like, because you're trading for the unknown. So I get that. And I acknowledge that. And I said this, I said, look, I would have traded him. I would have traded Salvi, which I'll get to here in a second. And I would have lived with it, and I would have got as much talent as possible, and I'd have been all in on the rebuild. I don't think there's anything wrong with admitting we're rebuilding, which the Royals did, threw themselves at the mercy of the court that, hey, we're out, we're rebuilding, and then didn't take advantage of the patience that you get when you admit it and the goodwill, the clout that they had built up off just winning a world championship. But I will say this. If I were to look at it and say, okay, maybe the plan was to keep Whitt and Salvi to protect the young guys as they come. Well, right now, that's not working with Bobby Witt Jr. They dropped him up to the top of the lineup. Whitt Merrifield was hitting in front of him, not getting on base, so not giving anyone that they had to work around because we don't want to, have Whitt Merrifield standing on second. He's not getting a single and then stealing second, and now they're pitching to Bobby Witt with a man on, and Salvi's over his shoulder, and so we're going to pump fastballs right down the heart of the plate. No. I'll quote Sam McDowell from the Star, who said 46% of the pitches he's seeing are the ones he chases. They're sliders out of the zone. They're pounding him with the pitch he can't see. The idea on keeping those guys, if it was to create a Cardinal-like transitional landing zone for your young players to come up and not have everything right on him, was immediately killed by batting him second, right? Bobby Witt Jr. batting him second. And then Whitt Merrifield not producing. And it hasn't resulted in Bobby Witt Jr. taking off. There's that. So far, fail. If that was the plan, was to walk out on a narrow, limb that he would still be productive into his mid-30s. Right now, you're failing on two accounts. One, Bobby Witt Jr. is not getting the soft landing spot. Two, Whitt Merrifield is not producing to help the team win. I will say, though, if the idea was to have veterans in the clubhouse to show guys the way, having him and Salvi, if you trade one, listen, I'd love to say everyone's Kreskin, and we would have traded Whitt, but we would have kept Salvi because we knew he was going to hit 48 home runs. Like we knew. I can't buy that. I can't honestly tell you that I wouldn't have traded both of them. I would have. If I traded one, I would. I mean, barring nobody offered me anything for Salvi, if I got a good package for Whitt and I got a Whitt Merrifield and I got a good package for Salvador Perez, I would have traded both. Are they better? Before we go any further about Whitt Merrifield, are they a better franchise watching Whitt Merrifield's career come to an end, if that's indeed what we're watching this year, if that's what it took to keep Salvador Perez?
That's a really good question. I think if they had traded both of those guys for a prospect package, and this is one of the things that's sometimes maddening about the Royals is even when they say that they're going to put guys out there on the trade market, that they want to trade them for major league ready talent.
I
right?
know.
On some level, it's frustrating.
It's almost the curse of the Greinke trade.
Yeah, but I feel like that may be part of it. I think some of it is, it's almost like they don't trust that their fan base is willing to be patient for talent that might take 2 or 3 years to see the major leagues, but is actually going to be impact talent. And when they trade for major league rated talent, a lot of times it's guys who are going to be role players in the major leagues. And it's like, well, what's the point? And then you might as well have just kept the player that you traded in the first place. But if they traded both of those guys for the kind of talent that they could have gotten, yeah, they might be better now. And I say that acknowledging full well that keeping Salvador Perez, and you think about what, it looked like after he blew out his elbow, it's like, oh my God, the Royals, just blew a great opportunity to get to trade him when his value is high, and he's never going to be the same player again after he blew out his elbow. It turns out the year off may in a season where the Royals were rebuilding anyway, may have been the single best thing that could have happened to Salvador, because he had been overworked for years, and a year of rest. He's a better hitter, better player today than he was, I think, before he got hurt. So I'll do credit there. And in isolation, I don't mind keeping Whitt Merrifield. I mean, the Royals, the loyalty that they show to guys is extremely admirable. The fact that, for instance, they already picked up Whitt Merrifield's option for next year, which you could say is foolish. They didn't have to do that. Now they're looking at a situation where they may regret that. But that doesn't bother me at all. For one thing, good for the players. I want the players to get money. I mean, Whitt Merrifield, he had to wait a long time to get to the major leagues, and signed an extension before he got to free agency, in part because he wasn't sure he'd ever get the big payday. So the money to him, the money to Hunter Dozier, good for the players. I'd much rather those guys getting that money than John Sherman, whoever the owner is, buying a 17th house in the Bahamas. So I have no issue with that. And I think that there is value in establishing yourself as an organization that cares about the people that work there. I will never fault an organization for treating its employees well, but ultimately, did it work? Are they better off? Is the team winning? Is keeping these guys around and refusing to trade them working? And the answer, I think, is clearly no. And it's frustrating because when the Royals do make trades, they sometimes hit on things really nice. Like one of the most underrated deals that they did make. I mean, they make so few trades, it's hard to evaluate them based on this. But think about Trevor Rosenthal. Remember Trevor Rosenthal? They picked up this guy as like a minor league free agent. He had been hurt a lot, but he had been a great closer with the Cardinals at one point. And the Royals saw him working out in the offseason. His velocity was back. I remember hearing talk that he could be like Ryan Madsen, a guy who was like a big find coming back from injury. And Rosenthal was an absolute monster in 2022. It's the pandemic season, so we didn't see him until July. And he looked so good in 13 innings that they were able to turn around and trade him. And because he was a guy, the one thing the Royals will do is if a guy's a free agent at the end of that season, they'll trade. They'll always trade a guy with 2 months left, right? And which makes you wonder what would they get if they traded a guy with a season and 2 months, or 2 seasons and 2 months left. 2 months of Trevor Rosenthal, they got Edward Olivares, who we can do a whole podcast on the way that they've played or not played Edward Olivares. But honestly, I think we'd be a lot less frustrated with the Royals if they just hadn't traded, if they hadn't got Edward Olivares in that deal, because the other guy they got in the deal is Dylan Coleman, who is one of the, they've had a great bullpen, as we've talked about, one of the brightest arms in that bullpen. I mean, he was very good today. He came in the extra innings with the zombie runner at second base and got out of the inning without allowing a run to score. His fastball is 98 and moves. And I mean, the Padres got 10 innings out of Trevor Rosenthal, and Exchange the World's got 2 really good talents. They should do more of that. They should trade. They'll have Dylan Coleman for this year and 5 more seasons. He's not going to be arbitration eligible for another 2 years. He's a real force. If they're going to build a bullpen like the HDH bullpen of 8 years ago, or whatever, I think Dylan Coleman is going to be right in the middle of that. But they don't do it enough.
But let me back up. I agree that's a good deal. There's no way around that. But those are the deals they make. And if Edward Olivares ends up being 2 or 3 years of a 4th or 5th outfielder, or just a guy who bounces up and down, which to this point is all he has not proven anything beyond that. And if Dylan Coleman, and he's thrown a handful of innings, and if Dylan Coleman ends up being a guy who's, serviceable middle guy, that's not how you win, right? I think their problem is I'm with you. If Dylan Coleman ends up saving 40 games 3 times in 5 years, and or two times in 3 years, and they move him for more talent, okay. If Edward Olivares ends up being a starting outfielder, okay. But they have had one trade where they really put together the core of a team. Right? Two trades. It was the Zach Greinke trade, which Alcides Escobar came, Lorenzo Cain came, and that deal. And there are some people that tell you they got lucky with those two. That Escobar was held up. It was the last time you could play with a no-hit shortstop. And, I think we're seeing his everyday ability. But they did get Jake Odorizzi in the deal, who ended up being part of the deal that ended up getting James Shields and Wade Davis. They need, those were key pieces, right? Dylan Coleman may be no more than, who is it? Tim, who was the guy they got from the Braves? The 5'7" lefty.
Oh, Tim Collins.
If Dylan Coleman is no more than Tim Collins, then that's exactly how that trade will be remembered, is as the Tim Collins trade, right? Like, they need core pieces, right? When if Whitt is not a everyday starter, they need a starting outfielder, which again, Olivares might end up being. The age that he's at right now says it's time. It's time right now. And the fact that they won't play him says that they don't believe in him until they then suddenly decide he's the best hitter on the team and he bats second, right? Like, that to me is the scarier thing here. Like, they don't trade enough. You're right. It doesn't matter if you're good at trades or not. If you can't trade a lot as a small market team, you can't be successful. So you have to try it anyway, whether you think you're good or not.
Right. And they don't do that, right? We're saying, but they haven't made a trade like the Greinke trade or the Shields trade. It's because they're not trying. I mean, we just said they're trading guys with 2 months left. What if they had traded Merrifield 3 years? What if they traded Jorge Soler after the 48 home run season? Like, the reason why they aren't getting core pieces in these trades is they're not making the trades that hurt, right? You've talked about this. They have to, at some point, you have to make a trade that hurts. They're not making a trade. And when we say hurts, it's one thing to make a trade that hurts when you're a team that's contending now, and that player you're giving away you're hoping will be made up for with the guys you're getting. But when you're losing 95 games, no trade is going to hurt. What do you know? Oh, you're going to lose 100 instead of 95? Who cares? You're trading for the future. Nothing you do now hurts. That is actually the core advantage of having a rebuilding team, is that you can trade without fear. But the Royals always seem to be afraid. They were afraid of trading Joaquin Soria because they were afraid of not having a closer on a team that lost 95 games every year.
Or trading unproven commodities still hurts them because they're too close to the individuals. That, like, I think one of the things that happened, we said this the other night, I don't remember, it was the last week or the week before, that maybe one of the worst things that has happened to the Royals is the fact that the Rays and A's have not been able to kick the door down and win. Rays have gotten to the series twice, but haven't been able to win it. And had they won it, then you could say that their approaches have also netted everything the Royals have and more consistency of winning and a ring, right? But without that ring, the Royals can sit back and go, but we know how to win championships. And the other thing is, I think the fact that they won the championship with the "we love our players more than anyone," they've taken it to mean that if we believe in them, that they can almost will it into existence, right? That if we just love them more, they'll be better. And they don't force themselves to evaluate. We've said it before. There has been nothing about Adalberto Mondesi's minor league career that said he was going to be a star. He has tremendous tools. But you know what? Tyreek Hill would have tremendous tools if you put him in a Royals uniform. You know what he wouldn't do? He'd hit. You'd probably be shocked at how well he'd hit. Like, by how well, I mean, like, you expect him to go out there and never put the bat on the ball. But he would probably put the bat on the ball, and you'd be like, wow, that's not bad. Then you play him in a game, and he'd be Terrence Gore, right? And that would be amazing for a guy who had never played baseball to be Terrence Gore. The problem is they've invested millions of dollars, thousands of man hours, walked away from numerous other prospects, made trades based upon this guy being the guy. And he's the bag of tools that won't come together. But they're going to will it to happen, is what they've decided, because they really think that that's what they did the last time. And it wasn't all that. I don't think they want to acknowledge the perfect storm part of Yankees and Red Sox being down and it being the perfect time. White Sox in a rebuild, Indians in a transition, all these things that were going on that they needed to go, we're going to have to be even better. And how do we get better? Well, we can't just rely on hope. And right now they seem to be stuck in Hopeville.
Well, I do wonder if even right now, if Tyreek Hill could hit a slider better than Adalberto Mondesi could. Adalberto Mondesi, I really feel like the Royals, more than maybe any other player that they have tried to develop in the last 10 years, they have really done him a disservice. Like, they have smothered him with love. I think what your point is absolutely right, is that they love these guys sometimes too much. And let's look at Adalberto Mondesi's career, because I really think it's very instructive. You say there was nothing impressive about his performance. There was one thing that was extremely impressive, and that was his date of birth. This is a guy who was signed right after his 16th birthday. He's born in late July, so he came to America in the following summer. He was still 16 years old in his pro debut stateside, not in like the Dominican Summer League, right? So to come to America, and he wasn't even in complex ball. He was in Idaho Falls, which is one level above, and he hit 290 with, showed off a lot of speed. Like, for a 16-year-old to do that, that put him on. People were talking about him as a top 100 prospect right then and there. And the following year, he went to full season ball at age 17. I cannot think of another Royals player in the last 10, 20 years who was 17 years old playing full season ball. Didn't play well, but again, you play.
That's my point, though, Randy.
Exactly. No, I agree. And then the following year, Wilmington, high A ball, and that's a tough place to hit. He was 18 years old. Now, he didn't hit. He hit 212 with a 257 on base percentage, but it was impressive. But was it valuable? No. But they kept at some point you would think that he had time on his side. What he had clearly had the skills. The tools, I should say, not really the skills. The Royals had plenty of time to let him nurture those tools into skills. If it had taken him 2 or 3 years at the A-ball level to refine his talent against a competition which wouldn't overwhelm him, he would have developed into a much better player. Instead, he goes to Double-A the following year, 19 years old, Northwest Arkansas, hits 243, 279 on base, 372 slugging. Not a great player, not terrible. And he's only 19, turns 20 late in the season.
Not good, though, Randy.
But not good. I agree. That's my point. And I believe this is the year. Remember, he was also suspended for 80 games. They eventually lowered it to 50 games because it was apparently an inadvertent cough medicine or something that may have been tainted. But like that there was like another wrinkle. That didn't stop the Royals. He went straight from there to the World Series. First player in Major League history to make his Major League debut in the World Series. And even that, I'm like, it was okay. It was a weird situation. Ben Zobrist's wife was expecting any moment. They needed a guy who just played defense. He could play. He got one at bat. Of course, he struck out. Up until now, they're pushing him aggressively, but I don't think they've stunted his development.
Yeah,
right. But then he's 20 years old. The following year, he finally starts to hit in Double-A and Triple-A, but for like 2 months. He's in the major leagues. He's starting every day at age 20. He still has no command of the strike zone.
Randy, you skipped the part about him making his debut in the World Series.
Didn't I just say that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said he's playing every day.
Yeah, no. We just said he made his debut in the World Series.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I was reading some comments, so my bad.
Commenters ruining things as always. Yeah. All right, guys.
I try to throw love to the comments if you're catching us on the podcast. When we stream live, you can comment if you're on Twitch, Facebook, YouTube. You can comment live in the chat room. So I try to get some of the comments up there onto the screen. So I apologize. Yes. Right. So go ahead.
All right. So anyway, so he was starting every day at 20. He wasn't good. He wasn't even he was just flat out bad. Okay, they rushed him to the major leagues. The following year, spring training, I remember this was 2017. The Royals are still trying to contend. Let's not forget. They're still competing here. They had, I think, I'm trying to remember. There were 4 different guys who were competing for the second base job. One of them, a very promising player named Whitt Merrifield, who'd come up the year before and actually hit better than anyone expected. They went with Adalberto Mondesi. Mondesi started at second base and was an absolute just disaster. I got to remember, I think he was like 4 for 43, if I recall.
Oh, it was awful.
Before they finally sent him back down he started for 15 games at second base and was 4 for 39. I take that back, with 3 walks, 16 strikeouts. I remember, at least there were probably 2 games in that stretch in which if he had just made contact with the runner on third base, the Royals probably would have won a game. They sent him down. Whitt Merrifield came up. Remember, Whitt Merrifield was sent to the minor leagues and came back up and, became the Whitt Merrifield that we know today. But the Royals probably lost 2 games in a season in which they were leading the wild card race into August and missed the playoffs by like 5 games. The last 2 games because they decided Adalberto Mondesi, 21 years old, who had never shown, who had all the tools in the world, but had never performed. They insisted on starting him in the major leagues over a guy who was much older, much more polished, and proved himself to be, much better, who ended up leading, despite starting the year in the minor leagues, led the league in steals, hit 19 home runs, like the massive disparity there. And ever since, Adalberto Mondesi, they keep playing him. They never really had a full season in the minor leagues to learn how to hit. And now the date of birth doesn't matter anymore. He's 26 years old, and he's had stretches where he has shown incredible talent in the major leagues. We talked about this last week. September of 2020, he was as good as I've ever seen anybody, but they're just flashes. And I really wonder if this guy had been in the Rays organization or the Astros or just a team where they took not just player development seriously, but play discipline seriously and taught this guy how to tell balls from strikes, how to hit a slider, he would probably be a much better player today.
Oh, of course. If he had to have had success before being promoted. And I do know, in speaking to people at that time and what they said they always wanted to challenge him. This was their logic. They were promoting him because they didn't think they needed a whole season of big statistics. That when he got in a rhythm and got good, and I've heard other scouts, not Royal scouts, tell me the same thing. They're older scouts, right? They're older scouts. But tell me that you could tell when a hitter's ready actually they tell you a pitcher, once he gets it, he's got it. Right. But a hitter, can run into guys and that's a more complicated thing.
Pitching is action, hitting is reaction. So you've got to learn how to react to higher quality talent.
Right. And so, but the Royals mindset was always that, well, as soon as they treated him kind of like a pitcher. Once it looks like he's got it, then we're going to go ahead and promote him on. Right. Like never. And he never was forced to have numeric success of any kind. Right. Because it was just about, no, we think he's good enough to survive at the next level. And it's like they wanted to win, my buddy Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus calls them trophies that don't matter. Right. They love we've got the youngest prospect at this level. He was always that guy. It was a trophy that didn't matter, but they wanted it. It was a way to show success of the organization. Yeah, but look at this young guy we got coming. He's here. And then they wanted him in the big leagues. And they wanted the trophy of a guy making his debut in the World Series. All these different things that didn't matter. And I'm with you. If he has all those tools and they didn't create a baseball player out of him, they wrecked him. Right? That's without a doubt. But
I think we have to worry that that's what's happening right now because
listen, you know what's amazing about the man? Here's what's amazing about the man. What's amazing is the fact that he still is not at the magic 1,500 plate appearance mark. I don't think.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm wondering when we're going to start hearing that about Bobby Witt. Like when the Royals are going to start trotting out the old 1,500 plate appearances is what you need to evaluate a guy. Something I've never heard from any other organization in baseball that you need 1,500 plate appearances.
And Dave Moore said it to me, and it was actually 1,500 at bats that he said.
Well, with Adalberto Mondesi, it's about the same.
It's about the same number, right? But just to be clear, right now coming into today, because Baseball Reference doesn't update till tomorrow, 1,358 plate appearances and 1,267 at bats. What's amazing is because he can't stay healthy either, they actually have this superficial number to hang on to and act like, well, we're still not there. And what's amazing is they've gotten to that number. They haven't even gotten to that number, and they've only got this year and next to control him.
Yeah.
That's what's so unbelievable is they botched the time, the service time management part. And let me tell you why it all comes back to, like, they don't know when to bunt. And when they do bunt, they don't know how to bunt. They're a team that dwells on tools and playing the game, yet they're terrible at bunting. How can those things coexist? I get it if the Red Sox got a new manager and he said, all you guys are going to bunt, and they went out there and popped them all up like the Royals do all the time, you'd be like, well, I get it. They've been a take and rake organization and against the bunt for 10 years. Of course, no one's been taught how to bunt. But that should be every guy. If the Royals had a team that wasn't hitting, but everybody could handle the bat, like how about today's game? And by the way, we're taping on Sunday. The bases are loaded. Whitt Merrifield hadn't had a hit all year. And they let Nicky Lopez bunt, or he did it on his own. They have a culture where the guy thinks it's okay to go ahead and bunt in a game where they're down a run, not tied, down a run, and he's going to give up an out and bunt to try to move a runner over a couple of nights. What was it, Thursday's game that he did that? And yeah, but Whitt Merrifield, there's never even a thought, no, we're going to let Whitt swing away, because, again, there's no philosophy. There's no understanding of general math. They are a gambling addict that walked up to a roulette wheel and saw that it went green twice in a row and said, green's coming up every time. And they don't understand it's 35-1 against it. But they're betting green every time, right? Like, I would get it if every Royal came up and they could handle the bat, and you shift around on Benintendi and he push bunts it into the shortstop hole and it's a single, and then they drop one down the line and every play's bang, bang and close on the bunts. But they don't even do that well to where you can say this old school. They don't play old school baseball well, and they don't get new school baseball. Like it's hard to figure out what the plan is.
So in the Royals' defense, I will say this. I believe Adalberto Mondesi had 2 bunt singles this week, which it's like he has one of the things that's been so frustrating with him is that he has all this talent, all this speed, and yet he's really just never learned how to bunt. And so the Royals have just, I guess, been pushing it. Maybe he's actually made a breakthrough there. I don't know. Given that he has 6 hits on the whole season, the fact that 2 of them were bunts in the same week.
I know. And he bunted for an RBI, and we said last week, this is the oh my God, my head's going to explode because now they're going to do it every time.
Look, at this point, you know what? If given the way he's swinging the bat, sure, bunt away, because like swinging away is not doing any better. But I actually want to kind of look at this philosophically, which is, have we considered, and maybe more to the point, have the Royals considered that bunting is simply harder today than it was even 5 or 10 or certainly 15 years ago? Because one of the things that really strikes me is I just think the Royals have not fully, they understand, but they have not fully adapted to the fact that the game is fundamentally different now because players are fundamentally better. And specifically, pitchers are fundamentally better than they were in demonstrable, measurable ways from even 10 years ago. Our mutual friend Joe Sheehan likes to say pitchers are witches now. And if you ever like are on Twitter and you see Pitching Ninja, his Twitter feed, and 10 times a day he'll show a video of a pitcher making something happen to a baseball that I don't think we ever saw in the 20th century. Right? Pitches moving 15 inches horizontal one way, and then the same pitcher with a pitch that goes 15 inches horizontally the other way. And the question we always have is, how do hitters ever hit the baseball when the pitchers are moving that much with more velocity than ever? Strikeouts are through the roof. It's harder to bunt a guy who's throwing 95 than to bunt a guy who's throwing 88. And that's why bunting was a big part of the game into the 80s and even to the 90s, and it simply isn't today. I think baseball would be a better sport if you could bunt. Just like I wish it would be a better sport if stolen bases were more important and strikeouts were less frequent, so we would see the defense be involved. I think baseball wants to move to that. But until that happens, the sport is what the sport is. The sport is a high strikeout, low contact, incredibly difficult to hit a baseball sport. And the Royals need to adapt to that. And that means, it's not that bunting is bad in the abstract, but bunting against pitchers today is not very good. It's just like stealing third base. Like, let me give you another example. The Royals, one of the things that's so frustrating about the Royals is that they actually do some of the little things really well. Like the Royals, I think they teach defense very well. They emphasize it. They play good defense. They teach base running really well. We always talk about Rusty Kuntz being like the stolen base whisperer, and the Royals run the bases very well, and they won a World Series because of Gerard Dyson and Terrence Moore's speed. But speed
Somebody ought to
doesn't
tell Andrew
matter.
Benintendi that.
Well, Andrew Benintendi, not a true Royal. They're still getting with the program there, which is a shame because he's the best hitter on the team right now. But specifically, like Whitt Merrifield, I think they showed the stat on the broadcast a couple days ago. I think he's 52 for 56 lifetime stealing third base, which is phenomenal. And I want to say, was it Byron Buxton? They showed a stat of one of the fastest players in baseball who's stolen third base once in like the last 4 years. The Royals teaching the steal of third base, a very underrated skill. The Royals do it great. Here's the problem. Stealing third base doesn't matter if the next guy strikes out.
Right.
And stealing third base is less valuable today than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when these guys who are teaching it were active in the sport. I'm sorry. I wish it wasn't that way, but this is the sport now. Focusing, how many times you see the Royals steal 4 bases in a game and none of the guys who stole the base scored a run? So who cares?
That's my point. They love these trophies that don't matter.
Right.
Exactly. We led the league in stolen bases. Doesn't matter. It doesn't. They stole third with 2 outs. I mean, like, you know what? Exactly. And then a fly ball went and you didn't get home. It's irrelevant. You have to be able to steal when it matters. And listen, they are better than those. But at the cost, at what cost? Do they spend all day, all spring training, all off season, all summer ball, or all winter ball, working on stolen bases, and nobody ever is like, hey, by the way, this is a bat. Here's how you hold it. Here's how you swing it. This is a strike zone. This is where you swing at it. You don't want to swing at this. You want to they fixate on the things that don't matter. That's great that they do these little things well. It's like a painter who can tape his ass off, but has no idea how to, use a brush. Right? And I'm sorry to painters because you're magicians. I'm terrible. And you're probably like it might be that taping's everything. Anybody can do it. I don't know. Whatever doesn't matter in painting, that's what they focus on. Right? And it drives me crazy. I do want to go back.
It's like a broadcaster who has a silky smooth voice, but keeps getting like the count and the outs wrong. But not that I'm thinking of any specific Royals broadcaster. I'll just stop there. Everyone on Twitter knows who I'm talking about.
Wait, I do want to come back to something though, and I want to come back to that too. So you're not getting away with that. And Tony said this when you were talking about all the wicked movement that's there. And that's a great point, except for the Royals, who don't seem to be able to get swing and misses from anybody, except for, I will say, back to your point about Dylan Coleman. The Mariners were having a real tough time. That ball was
I was going to say his fastball. There were pitches that I'm like, that's a slider, and then the speed gun comes up at 98. I'm like,
yes.
I don't know how Salvi was catching some of those pitches, but that kind of movement you cannot teach. That guy, I'm telling you, I really like Dylan Coleman.
I do too. I do too. And Tony, your point is valid, but I do want to. So's Rany's and Dylan Coleman. I want to give a tip of the cap to him as well. But I do want to come back to. Listen, I want to be careful here. Ryan Lefebvre does an amazing job. Does an amazing job. Period. That statement stands on its own. Ryan,
I agree,
knows the baseball as well or better than anybody out there, and he's great. And he's worked with all kinds of different people. He does radio, he does TV. He's fantastic. I have not one negative thing to say about Ryan, and Ryan is the best. When I interview him, Ryan can talk about things that aren't going well from the Royals, and can acknowledge, problems, and not throw the team under the bus. That you can do that,
and that's a difficult thing to do.
It is. I mean, because my talk show is not what the Royals want on their broadcast. This podcast is not what you want on the broadcast. And I get it, right? And Ryan doesn't do this podcast or my talk show on his broadcast. But there are times like, Whitt's not going to be happy about that. He knows this or that. He's got a way to do it. But there's also then the patty cake part that goes on that I just think helps to nurture the whole. It just speaks to the whole culture of if we don't acknowledge the failure, we didn't fail. And I think that is part of the coddled mindset that goes on with the team. I think until they, show some more success, we're left to believe that the part that they were left of center and loving and how that was a difference maker and how it did help them. And I do believe it helped them in 14 and 15. They took it, and then they just became intoxicated by it, and they went way too far out there. And I think the broadcast is an example of it as well. There's this feeling, what was it the other day? That like the walk in the world, and God bless Rex, but he says, what did he say?
He couldn't believe the ball four. He was like, "Where was that
where was
on the
it?
fourth consecutive walk by Jake Brentz to walk in to go ahead run in the 8th inning of a tie game?"
It would need to be over the heart of the plate, and even then, if the umpire didn't call it a strike, you could understand why, because nothing had been. Like Chris Bubich getting excited. Well, that was a borderline. He hit the sign a little bit ago, right? It's like a Bull Durham. We're shooting Bull Durham here or something. You don't get to complain about borderline strikes when you're. It's like guys that swing at everything, and then they take a ball and they can't believe they got rung up for a strike. It's like, what do you know for what a strike is? I mean, come on. I just it is frustrating. It's frustrating baseball to watch. And my overriding thing is, as the theme tonight has kind of been the organizational approach, is just there's no consistency, right? It's like with this guy we're doing this, with this guy we're doing that. Whitt's got to prove himself all the way up. Like there are old school baseball guys that would tell you Whitt Merrifield's path to the big leagues is how it ought to be. You ought to prove yourself in the minor leagues, and when you come up, you ought to be ready to play. But then there's Mondesi, right? They're like total yin and yangs of each other. There's just no consistency. That's what kills me.
Yeah, that is that. And then, and again, accountability. We're talking about a team where the starting rotation has, like, if you look at every starting rotation in the major leagues by strikeout rate, I think I want to say it was Clint Scholes who pointed this out on Twitter. I don't want to take credit for this myself. The Royals strikeout rate is like here for the starting rotation. Every other team in baseball is like, I think they're at like 12% or 13%. The next lowest is like 17%. It's massive. I mean, and even if you take Zach Greinke out, because Zach Greinke is 2 strikeouts in 16 innings, which I don't know if you could have gotten away with that in 1972. But exactly, if anybody in baseball, I don't care about that, it's Zach Greinke. That's fine. Take him out. Carlos Hernandez, after today, I think that's 5 walks and 4 strikeouts. Chris Bubich, 9 walks and 5 strikeouts. Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? And I hate to be a broken record, but like, I just want someone in the organization to even acknowledge that Cal Eldred's maybe not doing the greatest job in the world right now. Like, maybe it's our fault as the media. I mean, I'm sure you're doing a good job of this on your show, but in print, and I don't want to criticize because I'm no longer, even pretending to be a journalist at this point, not writing about the Royals. Of course, if I was, I don't think I think I was less a journalist and more just a rabble rouser and muckraker. But would someone just ask the Royals, "Hey, what's going on here? Why is this guy's not, none of the pitchers that you're working with, this guy, none of the starters you're working with are doing their job." And I'll give Alec Lewis credit. I think he's starting to start very politely. Alec is really starting to push on this. And I'm glad to see that. I want to see more of that. I think the Royals don't appreciate how fortunate they are to not have a larger media market where you've got competing newspapers that are fighting for scoops and for, having hot takes in order to get clicks. And I just feel like there needs to be a little bit more of a fire put under this organization for results.
I would encourage people to go back and I'll try to dig back and find them and tweet it out. My interviews, and it'll be the whole hour of the show, but my interview with Eno Saris of The Athletic, and then just recently, a week or so, I think last Monday, Keith Law. If you go to the Monday podcast, 5:00 hour of the last Monday podcast with Keith Law, Keith was a little bit more optimistic about the Royals pitching. He said, listen, there is stuff there. Eno Saris flat out said, no, it's not there. Like, what do they need to do? Get new pitchers. He said, yeah, maybe they can, pitch sequence. They can get a little something going. But he's like, I've studied the stuff, and the stuff isn't there. Right. And their strikeouts backs that up. Okay.
Absolutely. And I think to me, that is the more of a reason to get rid of Cal Eldred than anything else, because if like the only potential, like the happy solution is, it was Cal Eldred all along. Like if they get rid of Cal Eldred and those pitchers don't get any better, guess what? You weren't going to win anyway because all that draft capital you spent on those guys was wasted. Your hope is that a pitching coach change may actually suddenly in the numbers, Enos Saracen comes back a month from now. It's like, hey, these guys are actually showing better stuff than they did before.
I know that Jake Odorizzi got to the Tampa Bay Rays. He was a pretty good prospect. Didn't he get a cup of coffee here in the bigs or no? He never got.
I think he did. 2 starts, I want to say.
Did he? Okay. He credited his success, which he wasn't a Cy Young winner, but he was a good, serviceable pitcher for a little while. He credited his success with the Rays teaching him a new pitch. Right? I want to hear that. When we hear about a new pitch, it always comes with an Alec Lewis story saying their brother taught it to him, right? Or somebody else. It's never like the Royals organization taught me this pitch.
I'm so glad you brought this up. I'm jumping at the bit. I want to say one thing. The biggest surprise in this entire staff, I think, this year has been Colin Snyder. And I'll give the Royals a ton of credit. They added that guy to the 40-man roster. Vanderbilt pickup from the 12th round. He was, went to a great college program. And it was a shock when they added him to the 40-man. His numbers in the minors last year, he like an year of like 5 in AAA. I didn't see it. I don't know what they were thinking with this guy. He has looked great. The slider's been great. He's getting ground balls. He may be something special. In a recent column from Alec Lewis at The Athletic talking about the Royals pitching staff, Colin Snyder went back to Vanderbilt this offseason.
Yes.
To work on refining his pitches. And Vanderbilt is, to me, it's still the premier college program period in the country. I want to say their previous pitching coach was hired like straight from Vanderbilt to, I want to say like the Cubs hired him to be their pitching coach. He went straight to like the major leagues. You're seeing that trend more and more now. There are so many good pitching coaches working at collegiate levels that you're seeing guys hired straight from college to the major league level. So Vanderbilt, I would trust their pitching department more than any college maybe in the country. But still, a Royals pitcher had to go back to his alma mater to refine his pitches, and it's working. Like, what does that say about the Royals that he didn't go to Cal Eldred? He couldn't. Okay, fine. It was a lockout. But still, he went back to college, and now he's a brand new pitcher. That's really an indictment of the organization if the greatest breakthroughs we're seeing from their pitchers are guys who had to go elsewhere in order to learn how to pitch.
Scott Brown, it says Scott Brown enters his 10th season as Vanderbilt's pitching coach.
Okay, maybe it wasn't him. I want to say,
but you are right. There is somebody that happened, that a college coach was hired as the major league coach. I want to come back around to what you said about Cal Eldred. And I agree. Questions need to be asked. But I'm open to the idea that Eldred is not the problem. Like, I've had some people kind of hint at me that, like, you're barking up the wrong tree. The problem lies before they get to Eldred. And that, I remember when Josh Stalmont, was putting up some numbers, and it's like, everyone's like, Stalmont's coming. This is when he was still a starter. And talking with people in the Royals organization, and I was told, listen, yes, he just rears back and throws the fastball by people, but that's not going to work in the big leagues. We're trying to get him to get people out with these other pitches. And they ultimately, finally, he kept being down, and I guess he wasn't doing what they wanted him to do. And I think that's been fairly well documented. And then they gave him a shot, and he got knocked around. And ultimately, he ended up, getting bumped back to the bullpen because it's like, well, if you're only going to work with this pitch, then this is what you're going to be. Okay, that's great. Is that where the problem lies now? That the guys come through, they get people out with AAA out pitches that you can look at, and scouts can tell you that's not going to get big leaguers out, right? Because, like, I go back to, like, the trained eye, Keith Law, who I'm a big, giant Keith Law fan, wrote about Brady Singer when he was drafted. He's a reliever, right? And could be lights out reliever, could be a top shelf closer, but he's a reliever. Doesn't have a weapon for left-handers. Mm-hmm. He wrote that coming out of Florida. Nothing seems to have changed, right? Nothing is different. He could see that. He could see it all along. I'm no scout. I can read numbers and tell you, well, these numbers look like this guy who did this. But the true scouts can be like, that's not going to work. And they seem to not. What's been hinted at to me is that the people down at the minor leagues keep promoting guys to promote guys, and that there ought to be somebody going, that's not going to work. But they seem to want to get them up there, and then they're so unfinished products or project, shall we say, that should have been told, no, you can't use this pitch, right? Go get an inning without throwing this pitch and get people out. This is what the minor leagues are for, are not being told that. And so they get to the big leagues. And Brady Singer seems to be the most glaringly obvious, to the same point about how can Mondesi be advanced without strike zone recognition? How can he be advanced without really being able to handle the bat and being able to bunt all the time? How does Brady Singer get advanced as a starting pitcher and gifted a full season of service time in 60 games without a third pitch? Who thought that was going to work?
I'm a little bit, I don't want to be Brady Singer's biggest defender here, but in his defense, unlike Mondesi, he actually performed in the minor league. He had an excellent minor league season in 2019. And he has not been terrible in the major leagues. Like, he's actually been about a league average pitcher as a starting pitcher in over 2 seasons. He has not progressed, and I think that he won't progress without a third pitch. But I think to Singer, to me, is sort of shows that both sides have a point, because there were scouts who thought going into the college season that year that Brady Singer was a candidate for the number 1 overall pick. That going into the draft, there were still people who thought he was a top 5, top 10 talent in that draft. And then you had people like Keith Law.
Well, there were nobody with a pick in the top, 18?
No, but I mean, he fell for reasons that might have included wanting more money, but also sometimes guys fall and it's not clear why. I mean, that same draft, Matt Liberatore, who was maybe the best left-hander in high school, dropped to 16 where the Rays got him. Sometimes that happens. But my point is, he has been about as effective as you can be without a third pitch. Like, with just a fastball and a slider. But if they could have taught, like, you take a guy like that, if you think you can teach him a third pitch, you're like, we're getting a steal. He's got 2 major league ready pitches. We just need to teach him a third one. But the Royals have not done that, and he still haven't. I think he's thrown, he's appeared in 2 games this year. This is the other issue, which is, of course, guys are not going to get better without playing. Whether it's Brady Singer, whether it's Edward Olivares, who until today had not started a game this year, while Carlos Santana has like 4 hits on the season. Whether it's Kyle Isbell, who sat on the bench for 10 days and was finally sent down to AAA. Meanwhile, Michael Taylor starts every day against right-handers when Michael Taylor is susceptible to breaking stuff from right-handed. Like, Michael Taylor is a really valuable guy. We talked about this, batting 400 times a year. He's not a valuable guy batting 600 times a year. Who should be getting those other 200 at bats? I think Kyle Isbell is a great option. Left-hander, line drive hitter, complements Taylor well. He hit that crap out of the ball in spring training, I believe. Well, Olivares hit 500, and that did him no good. But Isbell made the roster, and then they just didn't use it. The Royals, they expect these guys to get better without actually giving them an opportunity. That's a completely another story.
I want to back up to Brady Singer.
Okay, sorry, we have so many grievances, you and I, right now. Well, we can't finish with one before we move to the next.
Because I don't understand, what about a 3.18 ERA in 153 total minor league innings with only 140 strikeouts? You think is so dazzling about his minor league performance?
Well, actually, I think you're counting he went back to AAA last year and got bumped. In 2019, he had a 2.85 ERA with a 3-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio. I mean, it was a good season. It wasn't. He was borderline.
148 innings. Mm-hmm. Let's do that. Yes, I did. I did just lump it all in. You're right. 148 innings, 138 strikeouts. Those are really the first 2 things I look at. How many innings has he thrown? And how much bigger are the strikeouts than the innings? That says stuff. Then I look over and go, okay, how much is he walking? And then after I look at the walks, I look back over at the innings and say, how many walks is that per inning? That's what it is. First of all, how much have we thrown? So I got a data point for how many of these do we got? Strikeouts, and that number better be bigger. And then the walks, I hope it's as small as possible, right? The walks are acceptable. If you walk 39 guys in that, okay, you're walking 1 every 3 innings, roughly. The strikeouts should be like, for 148 innings, 197, right? To just be given a free pass into the big leagues.
I don't know about a free pass. His strikeout rate was a little low for a top prospect, but the walk rate was good. Home run rate was good. And you talk about innings.
Okay.
148 innings actually in one minor league season nowadays is actually a really good sign. Very few guys can take the ball every fifth day and make 26 starts in a minor league.
But it was obvious because it was just going to be his 1 year. Like they were convinced that, like, no, we're going to prove everyone wrong. This is a top guy. He should have gone top 5, and we're going to show you. And here it is. We're going to put him in there. Because I will tell you, as important as it is for Asa Lacy to find the strike zone, it's important for him to figure out how to strike somebody out. And if you can't strike out minor league hitters, you're not going to strike out big league hitters consistently. You're not going to do it. Or you're going to get those that you can get, but the ones that you can't are going to crush you. That's the problem. And he was advanced. He's no different. He was advanced without earning the stripes. I mean, the modern game of baseball, they will strike themselves out for you. They're just waiting to be struck out. Come on,
I think you're underestimating major league hitters and major league pitchers. I think they do actually earn it.
Then why isn't he striking people out?
I mean,
then
even
he's
in
not
the
a major league pitcher. I'm not running down the guys who get strikeouts. I'm running down this guy who doesn't.
Well, I mean, even in the major leagues, his strikeout rate is not good, but it wasn't like terrible. Like the issue with him in the major leagues, I mean, look at it. Last year, he had 131 strikeouts in 128 innings. He had a better strikeout rate last year in the major leagues, and actually as a rookie as well, than he did in the minor leagues. So the strikeouts aren't the issue. The issue is he was way too home run prone because he doesn't have a third pitch. They could sit on one of two pitches, and if they get the one they're looking for, ball go far. And that has been his issue up until now.
And meanwhile, he's pitched once for 10 pitches since his opening disaster. Right. Clearly,
that's the problem.
He's just
not. You're not going to get better. I mean, pitcher's fine. You can work in the bullpen. It's not as I'm not as concerned about that as it would be for a hitter who needs the reps badly. But yeah, I mean, maybe Brady Singer, maybe he is a reliever. In which case, send him out there, wind him up, and let him go. Maybe he turns into a dominant reliever, and you actually get something valuable out of him. But the way I don't know what they're doing with him. It's mystifying. I mean, it'd be one thing if like everyone in the rotation was pitching great. At this point, send Chris Bubich down, send Carlos Hernandez down. Like they're not pitching well. You've made your point with Brady, or if you're not willing to give Brady a chance in the rotation because you've decided now he needs that third pitch and he hasn't earned it or whatever, then you should send him down and let him work on that third pitch. But I don't know what they're doing. If he's a two-pitch pitcher, then use him out of the bullpen. If you need that third pitch, then either force him to throw it in the major leagues in a rotation or send him to the AAA and let him work on it.
So riddle me this, Batman. You're the king of the age. What does 100 days away from 26 say the expectation level should be
for a pitcher?
Yeah, for Brady Singer.
I mean, it means he should be ready. But the thing with pitchers, man, you could have a 36-year-old Rich Hill who's never been successful in his life. Somebody convinces him that his curveball he should be throwing like 3 times as often as he has been, and suddenly he turns into one of the best pitchers in the sport. Like pitchers, aging curves with pitchers you can almost throw out age. Once they've proven they've got the command of their pitches, you can throw them out there 21, 36. The key is developing new pitches. And nowadays you have more ability, more tools to do that than you ever did before. Even 10 years ago, it's like you want to learn a third pitch, you're gonna have to stir with your fingers and grip and just kind of guess at it, and you'll throw a pitch and it's like, wow, that pitch moved. What did I do? Now you're in a lab with high-speed cameras and you're spending the whole offseason working on it. And if it moves, immediately. You go back to the video, you look at where your fingers were, you look at what you did with your arm, you do it again, you refine it. It's an iterative process. And suddenly you show up in spring training and you've got a new pitch. And this happens all the time. And that's why, to me, age is almost irrelevant. I want to say irrelevant, but it's much less relevant today than it ever was before with pitchers. And on that, briefly, I just wanted to bring up because we talked about the Giants last time out and what they've been doing with pitchers. Did you notice who pitched the other day for the San Francisco Giants? Former Royal, guy by the name of Jake Junis.
Yes. Yeah.
When Jake Junis signed with the Giants, I mean, I tweeted out, I'm like, he's going to have a good season. I know he is. We want to talk about examples of players of bad coaching, of just where the Royals have let down some other players. To me, Jake Junis is one of the best examples, because that guy has one of the great sliders in the sport. He doesn't have much else, but that slider, when it's on, was unhittable. And he was always this close to becoming a really good pitcher with the Royals. I mean, in his in 2018, his first full season in the majors, he had a 4.37 ERA in 177 innings. On the 2018 team that lost like 103 games, that's actually a really good season on a team that wasn't very good. He had 164 strikeouts against 43 walks in the majors. Even nowadays, when strikeout rates are through the roof, that ratio, really, really good. Never came together for him. I thought for sure they moved him to the bullpen. He moved to the bullpen late last year, had a couple of dominant outings, but nothing really ever came of it. They let him go. He went to the Giants. He's only pitched one game. And look, anything can happen in one game, because, I mean, I'm you and I are still old enough to remember when the Royals traded away Tuffy Rhodes back in 1993. The following year for the Cubs, he had 3 home runs off Dwight Gooden on an opening day. Thank God Twitter didn't exist back then, because if it did, I would have been banned and quite possibly arrested for threatening Herc Robinson's life. But Tuffy Rhodes went on to hit 5 more home runs the rest of the season. Turned out he wasn't the next superstar player. But Jake Junis in his one game, 5 innings, 3 hits, no walks, 4 strikeouts. 5 innings out of the bullpen, mind you. So it's not like, he just went out there for an inning. Like Brian Bannister and all those guys in San Francisco, they took a guy that we know has good stuff. I don't know what they've done. Maybe they've done nothing. Maybe it was a fluke.
Well, he started down
Pay
a
attention
path.
to that.
He started down a path last not this offseason that was just completed, but the offseason going into 21. And Alec Lewis wrote a detailed piece.
That's right. That's the one. It was his brother, wasn't it?
Yeah, working with that's who I was referencing. Working with his brother and everything that was going on. And it's almost like, okay, then he got away from there. The Royals got a hold of him and muddled it all up. He was electric in spring training. He was good early, and then it all fell apart. Now, let's see. It's one start or one outing. Let's see what he does. If he maintains it in San Francisco, I think that's the kind of thing I think, John Sherman and his crew are smart enough to be like, okay, what's going on here? Like, we can't be watching our guys, be bad for us and go somewhere else and be good for them. Like, that just can't continue.
To me, that's the wild card here, right? Is John Sherman, because everyone else in that organization has basically been there for many, many years, and they've accomplished great things. They've won 2 pennants and a World Series. Those guys are champions for life, and all credit to them. John Sherman hasn't done any of that, but he's also not beholden to the way the Royals have been doing things for the last 15 years. And he has an experience with the Indians that they're not maybe at that raised level of, willing to completely deconstruct a player and build them back up and make them better. But the Indians have taken a lot of guys and turned them into much, like Corey Kluber was a nobody when they traded for him in the minor leagues and turned into a Cy Young guy. Like the Indians have a proven track record. So he knows what's possible. He knows what is possible if you can make a player better. And he's been very quiet up until now as owner. And given when the timing of when he took over the team right before the pandemic, like, he gets a pass for all. The last 2 years have been an extremely weird and extremely stressful. And for a guy who literally bought the team right before the pandemic, right before attendance went down to 0, and there was a 60-game season, probably a financially stressful period of time. As we're coming out of that now, he's the guy. If there's going to be a change here, it's going to be pushed by him. It's going to come from him, and whether that means letting people go and complete upheaval, or just simply pushing some of the good processes the Royals are tinkering with, are toying with, are playing with in the minor leagues, and pushing that to warp drive. And like, this is the future. We need to do more of this. I don't know what it'll be, but I'm really hoping by the end of the season we see some directives from him that the Royals have to change some of the things that they're doing.
Randy, let's wrap up with our minor league minute. What do you want to hit on this time?
So a lot of things we could talk about. I'd like to point out, because we've talked about Carlos Santana and his amazing. I think his batting average was actually up to like 103 today. So congratulations to Carlos for getting it over the half Mendoza line.
He did manage to drop a foul ball that then resulted in a run.
You can't expect perfection, Soren.
No.
So,
and I don't like running down Carlos Santana. He's had a fine career. Everyone's career comes to
hey, and I was excited when they signed him, because again, the guy has patience at the plate, which the Royals just have never had, and sometimes the guy's bat just dies, and if we're
Right.
there, we're there. And I will say, his underlying batted ball metrics this year have actually been not bad, and it's sort of perplexing that he is hitting as badly as he is. So if they want to keep him going for another week or two at this point, what the hell? But the reason I bring him up is, if the Royals are going to replace him, we everyone's excited to see Nick Pratto. And I still like Nick Pratto a lot. He's off to a slow start, not very concerning, but a little bit concerning, but not terribly concerning in AAA. Same thing with MJ Melendez. But the guy who's doing exactly what we hoped he would do, and it's just quietly just been a metronome of consistency since he was drafted, really. And that's our favorite Italian breakfast, Vinnie Pasquantino, who is hitting 286, 423, 482. And I love to see it. He 13 walks and 9 strikeouts. This is a guy who had 64 walks and 64 strikeouts last year. I don't care what position you play. You have as many walks as strikeouts in the modern game, and you can hit for any kind of power. He's not a huge power guy. He's he's a Wally Joyner type, I guess I would say, at the plate, a 15 to 20 home run guy, but with that kind of plate discipline. And he might be ready. I mean, he went from A-ball to AA last year and continued to hit. He's in AAA and he's hitting. I'm wondering if the Royals are going to make a move. If Santana is done in the next couple of weeks, I think Nick Pratto could still benefit from staying in AAA. His strikeout rate is still too high. That's the one thing that worries me with Pratto. Pasquantino's strikeout rate is not, and I would really be interested. He's as ready as he's going to be. The Royals sometimes rush guys. He's not going to be rushed. I think he's ready to go for the major leagues.
Well, I think they are looking at him, right? Because they've got Nick Pratto and MJ Melendez running around the outfield.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that. I mean,
well, you can't Randy, because baseball doesn't allow you to trade players. The ones you have to fit in every spot. So if you have guys playing the same spot, you have to move them to other spots.
It's a real shame. They really should change that rule. They should change that rule and let teams trade. I think it would actually benefit the sport a lot. But those are the rules. The Royals are just playing with the rules that they've been handed. I mean, so what if the Mariners can make 17 trades a month? The Royals are not allowed to trade, and we'll just have to deal with it. Yeah. But no, I mean, I think one game it's an experiment, fine, but we talked about this before. You move MJ Melendez out from behind the plate, you eliminate 2/3 of his value. I think it's just ridiculous.
He is just 24 years old. Which is age appropriate.
Pasquantino, yeah, which he's not. You think he's older than the other guys? He's because he was a college guy, but 24. I mean, he's ready for the major leagues. 24. I think
he's not old yet. He's not young anymore, but he's not old yet for the level. So yes, he would be a guy that you would think about. Rany, great stuff. Hopefully, we're going to watch the Royals take down the White Sox. They've lost 7 in a row, so that would be a great thing. And
hey, the division is still up for grabs. Nobody's above 500 in the AL Central. I tell you, that is the Royals' secret competitive advantage, the division they play on.
Yeah.
But it would just like the Royals to have a year where 500 is enough to get to the playoffs, and they're still in last place.
Yeah,
let's hope that changes.
Let's hope it does. Rany, great stuff as always, buddy. Appreciate it. Always great talking Royals baseball with you. We'll do it again next week. We encourage you to listen. We should be up very soon on Apple and all the other podcast formats. In the meantime, just watch our Twitter. We tweet out the link where you can get the podcast. And, of course, we stream live every Sunday night at 10 on Facebook, on Twitch, on YouTube. And, of course, you can take part in the comments there. And if you would, hit the like, hit the subscribe. Doesn't cost anything, and it helps us out a lot, so we would really appreciate it. So for Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Kaufman Corner.